Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Caftan, Style as Liberation and Cultural Exchange. My name is Tavia Nyong'o, and I am the curator of the public program here at the Park Avenue Armory, and I'm so pleased to see all your stylish faces here, and makes me feel confident that we're going to have a really vibrant conversation about the topics that we have been thinking about. I have been meditating on this image of André Leon Talley since we selected it for this program about a year ago, and one person mentioned it. He looks a little serious in the picture, which he does, but I like to imagine that is the look that he gives you, and he wants you to command that you take yourself seriously, that you take fashion and style and self-expression seriously, and that you channel your ancestors, as he himself often said that he proudly did wherever he went and into whichever room that he was present. So he's certainly present with us here. He was present last night at the dinner. And I hope that he will remain present in the future in many, many ways, including ways that we will explore later in the program. But now I want to very quickly get things rolling by introducing our first speaker, who will provide the actual welcome to the event. That is Dr. Joyce Brown. And I just want to say that there are architects of buildings and that there are architects of possibility. Dr. Joyce Brown has spent her life constructing bridges between fashion and art, between commerce and culture, between what is and what could be. When Dr. Brown became president of FIT in 1998, she reimagined the entire structure. The first woman, the first African American to hold that position, these firsts marked the beginning of a story about transformation that goes deeper than demographics. Dr. Brown understands something fundamental, and I learned that from my very first encounter with her, that fashion isn't frivolous. It's the daily poetry we wear. It's the silent language we speak before we even open our mouths. Under her leadership, FIT became a laboratory for cultural expression, a place where young minds learn that what they create can reshape how we see ourselves and each other. I mentioned architecture. Quite literally, through her vision, FIT built its first new academic building, and she also presided over the creation of the Social Justice Center in 2021, about which I think we'll hear more today, bringing together major fashion houses to invest over $4 million in BIPOC youth. Dr. Brown knows that fashion is autobiography. Every stitch tells a story, every silhouette, such as the beautiful ones that we see in the library, speak truth. At the museum at FIT, she's curated conversations between past and present, showing us that what we wear is hope made tangible. Here at the Armory, where she's a long-serving member of the board, Dr. Brown brings that same vision. Recent drill hall productions, such as Rashad Newsom's Assembly, the first I was privileged to be on the curatorial programming team for, or just more recently, Trajal Harrell's Monkey Off My Back. I have to say that Trajal sends his regrets that he is not here. He is a huge ALT fan, and he was ready to get on a plane from Belgium to be here. And I said, please, but he's like, no, you don't understand. I'm really sad not to be here. But any of those who saw Monkey Off My Back or The Cat's Meow, underscore how deeply this message of the connection between fashion and dance and art resonates here at the Armory. So through Caftan, style as liberation and cultural exchange, the relevance of the ideas of the late, great André Leon Talley embody everything that Dr. Brown represents, the radical idea that style can be liberation and that culture belongs to everyone. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Joyce Brown to say a few words.
He's taller than I am. Thank you so much, Tavia. That was a very lovely introduction. And I am very, very proud to be here with all of you. I'm really deeply connected to the topic that we explore today in all my roles and in all my life's work. You know, fashion and style really are always a reflection of the sociocultural, political, and economic context and mores of the time. Any given snapshot of history that we explore will harbor remnants of the story to be told by that wordless societal representation of the day. For African Americans, fashion has always been a political statement and a reflection of personal power and confidence. From the days when kidnapped Africans were turned into slaves by men of wealth, those slaves were seen as publicly representing their master, such as those who were in positions like livery drivers, jobs like livery drivers, not the ones in the fields. They were dressed in fine cloth and high style, shall we say exaggerated style, to represent the status of their owner. And in the days that followed Reconstruction and the Great Migration, the newly emancipated recreated sartorial statements reflective of their new status. And while there was an appreciation of the indigenous dyes and colorways from Africa, there was an alignment and an adoption of some of the colonial codes of social and economic class symbolized really in the choices of style and representation at that time. But brewing in the ranks was the birth and the growth of an aesthetic requiring meticulous self-definition and resistance, that of Black dandyism, which used style as a protest to reclaim dignity and identity. And this expression of individuality really did become a challenge to societal norms. So the Harlem Renaissance brought the introduction of Blackness to the conversation. It had its own distinctive style and expressed with bravado and flair and creativity. And today it can still inspire fashion and cultural movements. The civil rights movement then ushered in a new era of nonviolent protests, and influenced by the Black church, the notion of respectability politics was born. There was a desire to reframe the conversation and narrative around a Black intellectualism and class and acceptance. The idea was we should protest against racism and segregation and inequality, but we should represent the family well and do it with impeccable style and taste. The Black Power and Black Arts movement took a more radical and defiant approach to fashion and resistance and representation. This was an embrace of Black identity, natural hair, natural beauty, and through it all, from the lyrics of the music to the Afrocentric representation, we were speaking truth to power, and we dressed the part. The murder of George Floyd in 2020 and the Black Lives Matter movement was a tipping point for conversations about race and gender and identity, representation, equity, belonging, inclusion. And a momentous epiphany occurred in America, where the media and arts institutions, the academy, corporate America, politics, and the fashion industry all had a great awakening about the depth and the reach of racism, about the disparities and the massive economic divide in our country. So that confluence of events revealed an opportunity, really, to build on the guilt and the regret that was so apparent in the rhetoric expressed with this new realization. A prime target for change and reparation was the fashion industry. And while we all knew that the window of opportunity would shut itself, some of us formed centers and councils and a Black fashion fair, and we will hear more about all those things later. And while we may have been prescient in expecting the demise of this enthusiasm for the advancement of BIPOC opportunities, no one could have anticipated the tidal wave of erasures of constitutional rights and protections and the loss of hard-won freedoms that we have all witnessed in the last 9 months. So these are dark days in America, but we are nothing if we are not resilient. Amid the backdrop of the disenfranchisement of people of color, the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art mounted its prolific exhibition, Superfine, Tailoring Black Style, which was curated by Dr. Monica Miller, who is here with us today. It was a huge success, and it resonated mightily, and it speaks to and it describes Black style in the evolution of radical political statements. So we can always find signs of hopefulness. There's been a resurgence of elegant menswear with inspired tailoring, and at the same time, a rejection of rigid gender norms, a fluidity in shapes and drapings that really transcend traditional gender-specific fashion. For many of our emerging designers today, we're seeing the power of storytelling. More and more collections reflect and reference history and myths and memories and activism and power and dignity. We see bold color palettes, sculptural forms and silhouettes, cultural references in style and identity. We are a strong people, and part of our storytelling is depicted in how we show up and how we control the narrative. So as we reflect on the historical antecedents of Black style today through the lens of resistance and representation, we would be remiss to ignore the legacy and the imprint and the influence on the fashion industry by the indomitable André Leon Talley. He not only blazed a trail through his work at the Met with Diana Vreeland and his work at Vogue with Anna Wintour, he raised the wearing of the caftan to a dramatic art form and his signature statement, always powerful and always unique. So today we will have the opportunity to explore how Black style as a reflection, resistance, and representation presents itself in 2025. We have a panel moderated by Emil Wilbekin, the founder of Native Son, the former editor-in-chief of Vibe, and just saying, it won the National Magazine Award under his leadership. And most importantly, he's currently a professor on the faculty at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Professor Wilbekin will be in conversation with Dario Calmese, a multidisciplinary artist and the founder of the Black Imagination Institute, Dr. Tanisha Ford, a prolific author and professor at the City University of New York Graduate Center, and Antoine Gregory, the founder of Black Fashion Fair and a proud alum of the Fashion Institute of Technology as well. Thank you all very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Good, good. Well, thank you, Dr. Brown, for that beautiful introduction, and Tavia for setting the stage, literally, for this conversation. What I love about the two commentaries that we heard before is that we now sit in this space in 2025 of unknowing. And in the unknowing, having to carry what our ancestors have brought before us. So I think that that would be a great place to begin, is for each of you to tell me, historically, what has been an iconic style moment that in history meant something to you and shifted the way that you see the world. I got it.
Okay, I will hop in here. You know, when you first mentioned it, the first that came to mind for me. Oh, by the way, good afternoon. My name is Dario. Such a pleasure to be here. It's such an honor. Thank you, Dr. Brown. So I thought actually about LaBelle. And Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, and the ways in which, in this time period, these incredible singers and Black women brought this idea of the future in their dress, in their style, in a way that said that even through the way we show up, we see ourselves in the future, that we are going to space, which is really interesting to think about. Even someone like a Phyllis Wheatley speaking about space when she was writing her poetry in the 18th century. And so for me, I would say LaBelle was a real catalyst moment for me in understanding the full breadth of the Black lived experience that goes way back to the 50s and 60s.
I love that.
Yeah, it took me a second. I had to pause, in part because I'm a historian, but also because I'm a Black girl who grew up in a Black house that always had Ebony and Jet magazines. And so my mind was thinking, what is time, actually, right? The bending and folding of time that existed in those magazines, either in my own parents' home or in my grandparents' home, looking back into these old magazines and seeing Black women in their fineries, and then looking into my mother and my grandmother's closets, and wanting to wear their clothes, putting their clothes on. It was so formative for me. And those moments were overlaid with my own memories of growing up in the hip hop generation, right? So it's a bending and folding of old Ebony and Jets with Vibe and Honey, you know? And so I think the hip hop generation era of FUBU, Fat Farm, Cross Colors, all of those things were deeply influential for me because of the very African and African diasporic sensibilities that lived in those garments and the political message therein.
Love that.
Hello, everyone. I would say mine would definitely be like going to church. I think my grandmother was a pastor. So she was always dressed really nicely. I always had to be dressed really nicely because I was a representation of her, but also the church. But I would often go with her to like thrift stores and like estate sales and watched her kind of become the woman that she was going to be through these different, like not necessarily, we didn't have a lot of money, so we weren't like, but she would just like find really amazing pieces. And that's how I got like, that was like my first intro into like Yves Saint Laurent. Like she would just like go to estate sales and buy like the designer clothes, but like they were like secondhand. And she was also a furrier. So she worked in the garment district. Like for a furrier, she wasn't a furrier, but like she would have like tons of fur coats that she would just get from like her boss, like people who would leave their stuff. So like I would be a kid like wearing her fur coats, and it was like some random person's name is like embroidered in the pocket, and it was just like you could literally be whoever you wanted to be through clothing, through fashion. And I think that was like my real first introduction to just like becoming who I am, I think today too, as like someone who like is deeply inspired by the women in my life, but also fashion and clothes.
I love that. Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around preacher and furrier all in one. It's everything to me. I love that. So we're, as we're lifting up André Leon Talley, I want to kind of stay a little bit in the 2020 space first. And so 2020 was, you know, this racial reckoning, this great call out for identity. People wanted to be called their proper pronouns and represented as who they are. So I'm going to stay with you, Antoine. You started Black Fashion Fair in 2020. Can you explain to us what was the impetus, the idea, and inspiration for it?
Yeah, so I think in 2016, I started this thread on Twitter. and like I had a really big Twitter following, and it was just like Black designers that you should know, and like I would always like write about Black designers, post their websites where you could shop them, like some of my favorite things. And over the years, I would go through the thread and see like some of the links didn't work anymore, or like some of the brands, because they no longer existed. And for me, it was just like, if we don't have the proper support and the Black designers don't have the access and the resources and a buying audience, they could be super successful for a moment and then just literally not be here. And I think with Black Fashion Fair, I wanted to create a platform to make sure that they had the reach to the audience that wanted to see them. And also, when 2020 happened, it was like, retailers were like, well, we can't find Black designers. Like, where are they? Where are they? And I was like, I had built this, basically like this database of just like tons of Black designers. So when we launched Black Fashion Fair, we launched with like a directory of like 300 plus Black designers. We launched our retail store with 21 Black designers. And these were designers who were going to become like really successful CFDA award winning designers. Like the Affilio, we worked with Brandon Blackwood. But it was a challenge. It was almost like a call to action, but also a challenge to say like, you're saying that these Black designers don't exist, but here they are. And ever since then, like Black Fashion Fair has kind of like led that path. It was like, we worked with Saks, Nordstrom, Neiman's, Bergdorf to help them get the right designers into their stores too.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know the origin story, so that's great.
Oh yeah.
So Tanisha, 2020, what did that represent for you as a scholar, as a writer, as a journalist?
2020 was this point of rupture for me, but also a time when I saw people imagining new possibilities for new futures. I live in Harlem, and I saw my community be ravaged by COVID. And at that same time, I saw those same community members rally and form mutual aid networks and other kind of support communities. And I saw the ways in which the new kind of protective layers we had to wear became part of our everyday dress. So now, a mask is part of that second skin that we associate with clothing, or latex gloves when we thought that we could contract it by touching things, right? And so seeing how it shifted our own dress sensibilities because of the ways that we had to protect ourselves from one another. So it was during that time that I was writing this book about the history of Black mutual aid networks and fundraising and grassroots fundraising and philanthropy, a history that this very building was a part of that I was writing. It was based in New York City. And so for me, it was this moment where I saw Black youth, as Dario mentioned, imagining what the future could look like, what could be on the other side of that. And I think it's always that energy that fuels the fashion and style innovation that will define a generation.
I love that. So Dario. A little bit of history. Dario was a photographer who worked with me when I was at Essence.com at a time where street style photography was becoming kind of important. It was every brand, every platform, and Dario came in and said, I want to just shoot these amazing Black women on the streets for Essence.com, and we started to do that, and he started to do that, and it became super popular. So imagine being locked in my house during 2020 and going on Instagram and seeing that, the shock of, there's never been a Black photographer to shoot the cover of Vanity Fair, and to see that Dario was the photographer to break through that glass ceiling. And go.
Yeah, what would you like me to say?
What was that like for you in that moment? How did that happen? What does that mean for you?
Yeah.
All the things.
Yeah, it was wild. It's so interesting. Even as you were speaking, Tanisha, I was thinking about the ways in which that moment in 2020 shifted so much of fashion. Even these gloves actually is a direct result of that. So, you're working, remember we were like, everyone had to have a glove, you couldn't touch your Amazon packages. And I felt so wasteful, and I was like, wait, I think I have a pair of gloves in my closet, and I pulled these out, and I've literally been wearing them ever since because I don't want to touch none. But no, that moment in 2020 was pretty amazing. I started shooting for Vanity Fair maybe about a year before, and this was the first shoot that they had commissioned once they had shut everything back down. And so it was very much a scrappy crew. And my own process as a photographer, as an artist, is I just keep a huge database of images, references, and I just kind of cycle through them when a job comes in, and I put things aside that just kind of intuitively feel right. And one was the image of the scourged back, which they call him Whipped Peter. And it's an image that I believe the current administration just took away from state parks or something like this. And I put it in my mood board. I was like, this just feels right. I don't know, I'm not thinking about it, but it feels right. And really thought to have it as an interior image. I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity, considering the moment that we're in, right? So, the extrajudicial media publicized killing of George Floyd had maybe happened about a month before. And I'm like, what do you say in this moment? Like, how do we address what we're dealing with? And when we think about Blackness, when we think about Black imagination, when we think about the achemal power that we possess to really transmute pain into a really like a serum of beauty. What does that look like? How do we interpret that? And so when we were shooting the image, it came up on the screen, and the set kind of went quiet. And again, this was meant to be an interior image, but when it came up, it was kind of like we all knew that something was different and that this could possibly be a cover. And it was like from that moment on until I think maybe 14 days, was such a quick turnaround, that there was an entire campaign. Oh yeah, there we are. There was an entire campaign literally through all the Condé Nast magazines, through the entire building, because at the same time, this was a moment when people were being canceled for posting Black squares. So the magazine was extremely nervous to publish this image at this time. There were tons of emails, tons of conversations with Radhika, like essays on like what the color blue means to Black people. Like, it was very intense. They asked Viola herself, like, are you comfortable? That's also outside of protocol for magazines. And so it was a surprise to all of us that they actually decided to run the image, and it's like the shot heard around the world. So that's what happened.
So thank you for sharing that, because I think it's so interesting to find out the stories behind the creativity, the cover, the planning, and particularly in that moment in time. But what did it feel like for you in that moment, being the first Black photographer of this very rarefied, historical, magazine that kind of has set the tone for so many different things in our culture?
It's interesting. One, it was overwhelming for sure, because I was actually also still isolated. So I was by myself as all of this is happening, as, reporters are calling, people are calling my parents, like, the world begins to shift in a time like that. And it's also an experience that there aren't many people that you can commiserate with or reach out to for like assistance or help. Like, what am I supposed to be doing with this? Luckily, I was actually on set shooting a job for Clinique, and so that was a really beautiful holding space. At the same time, as a creative, as an artist, like, sometimes you just kind of channel something and put it out into the world and let it exist. And I also understood that this was larger than me. It involved me, but it was not about me. And so I was a holding space, a vessel for something like this to exist in the world, and really keeping that position. There's no way that I could have created an environment that would have had a magazine exist for 106 years and not have a Black photographer shoot the cover. That was not I couldn't have done that. And I also understood that although I was the first Black photographer to shoot a cover for Vanity Fair, I wasn't the first Black photographer who could have shot a cover for Vanity Fair. And so for me, it was like, what do we do in this moment? How do we leverage this energy in order to really create impact? So yeah, I'll stop there.
Wonderful. So think about growing up. André Leon Talley is probably 90% of the reason that I went into magazines. The fact that there was a possibility model of this Black man that was someone who I could see, who was writing, who was brilliant, who was styling, who was, working in fashion, critiquing it, creating it, all these different things. So I want to ask you all, what was André Leon Talley's impact on you in terms of the work that you do today?
When ALT transitioned, The Atlantic reached out to me and asked me to write a piece about him. And I had just read his memoir. And talk about tea and shade as a methodology, okay? He was reading down in that book, okay? But what I loved about that piece, the whole hook of my piece, was one that decentered Vogue and centered Ebony. And it connected so much of my work on the early history of the Ebony Fashion Fair, which of course was a fundraiser, a traveling fundraiser that moved around the Black community across the country. And he worked very closely with Eunice Johnson, would travel to Paris with her, to go to all of these renowned fashion houses and to procure clothing, to shape the fashion content of Ebony magazine. And I felt like it was important that we know that history, because Vogue loomed so large in his biography, but the Ebony piece was so important because, as I said, so many of us, whether you even had a passport, most Black homes had an Ebony magazine subscription, right? So there was a way that even though his tenure there was very short-lived, the legacy and the impact on that magazine that then shaped the lives of so many young Black folks, especially young Black queer folk, came through in that magazine that on the surface seemed more socially conservative than it really is once you start digging through the history and really sit with Ebony magazine like that. And so I think that his impact for me was one that he was influencing me before I ever even knew it, right? Before I ever even associated that name with the work that I currently do on dress and style. So I thank you. I thank you for that.
Love that. Thank you, André.
I think André was like the only Black person that I could see myself in when like working in fashion and working in media. But really it was during Mariah Carey's Emancipation of Mimi era. He was like her creative director, like between him and June Ambrose. And for me, it was just like, oh, I can do fashion, but also I can do music, I can do like film, I can do all these different things if you're just like really good at just like the fashion part, like that you're smart, that you're well-read. Like André was like, it was all those things that I really think allowed me to even launch Black Fashion Fair, where it's like, I want to create a community of people like this who really challenge the world. And I think André did in so many ways. And I think to even be a part of the upcoming exhibition, and the book just came out, it was like to be able to be a part of that legacy is super important to the work that I'm doing. But yeah, it was really through music and watching like the making of the Shake It Off video with Junior Ambrose and Andre. And he's actually in the video with like Pharrell and Mariah, and they're in the Louis Vuitton store, like sitting on Louis Vuitton trunks. It's like, oh, that's fabulous. Like, oh, I could do that. Right. So yeah.
Would you mind, while we're with you, just tell the audience a little bit about the book with Rizzoli and the project with SCAD that you worked on and your role in it?
Yes, so we have an exhibition coming out. It opens October 15th in Atlanta, but it's called André Leon Talley, Stylist Forever. And the book is of the same name. Thank you. And what's really amazing about that project is that he was such a big part of SCAD. And when he passed on, he left pretty much all his like worldly possessions to SCAD. So like everything that we have in an exhibition is a gift from Andre. This is what he wanted. He asked like that there be an exhibition in his name with his stuff. So even before like everything went to Christie's, like SCAD went to the house, like they picked all these really amazing, everything is like actual full looks. And we just had like so many cool pieces of just like from his life. From when he was like really, really thin to like the later years in his life, like you can just kind of see the progression and how even with the caftan, like how that became armor for him because of his weight and how it fluctuated. And then the mannequins are like 6'3", and they look like him, and they are big, and they take up space, just like he did in his world and in fashion. So I think SCAD did an amazing job at honoring him, and I think we all were on set for 2 weeks in Savannah, shooting the images for the book and the exhibition. And then I got Mariah Carey to write a piece for it, which was like, that was like a full circle moment, because it's like, that's why I'm even here. Because like that was that moment of watching the making of videos, like super pivotal to my career. But yes, I'm super excited about the book. The book is really, really beautiful. The exhibition is really beautiful. And I think to be able to be a part of a legacy like that is just transformative.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Dario, what was Andre's impact on you?
I mean, wow. Andre's impact on me was, very personal. He became a mentor. I would say Andre was one of the first people to see me. And to, often you travel through life and you're looking for mentors, you're looking for a type of permission sometimes to be and exist. And Andre and I worked on an exhibition first at FIT, actually. We were on the committee. And then I brought him out to St. Louis for an exhibition, Reigning Men, at the St. Louis Art Museum. And there we became good friends. I interviewed him for our podcast, The Institute of Black Imagination, and he describes it himself as being a bit brackish. Oh, I described it as being brackish, and he was like, I was actually a stone cold bitch. I'm sorry about that. And so we had a really beautiful relationship, but, after that, he was like, so what's going on? Like, what are you up to? What are you doing? And I showed him some images that I took in grad school a few years back of Great Expectations. And he actually just fell in love with these images in a way that my teacher at the time couldn't give it to me. And anyone who's been in art school and gone through critiques knows what I'm speaking about. And so to have this figure, Andre, kind of give that type of permission and acknowledgement, and then thereon, like, support. I had an exhibition at Harlem School of the Arts. He took a car, came down. I was in the back doing something with the bar. I came out. Someone's like, I think André Leon Talley was just here. And I was like, no. they're like, big guy, red coat, and I was like, that's André. And yeah, he came all the way down from Westchester to see this small show that I was doing at Harlem School of the Arts, wrote his name in the book. And I think that's a side of André that many people don't know, was just how extremely generous and caring he was. A lot of the work that he did for incredible designers, tons of designers, Laquan Smith, I can name tons of names, working to support them behind the scenes, and he was just an incredible figure.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I know you all were very close. So I think about, I was, a few weeks ago on my birthday was the Black in Fashion Council dinner, and it's their 5th anniversary. And Lindsay Peoples, who is the editor of The Cut, but also one of the co-founders with Sandrine Charles, said, why on earth would you want to spend your birthday at the Black in Fashion Council dinner? And I said, great question, fellow journalist and editor. And the answer is very easy for me. When I was coming up in magazines and media, there was never a room like this. It didn't exist. And the fact that I could be in a space where there were over 100 Black creatives who are editors, stylists, influencers, celebrities, designers, creative directors, content creators, and I could go on, it's very, very special. So at this stage in my life, I want to be in rooms that matter, right? And so what better way to spend my birthday? So I think about, just last week, we had the cover of Elle magazine with ASAP. We have the cover of Love magazine with Solange. Mona on the cover of Harper's Bazaar. There were all these amazing covers that came out. Jesse Washington was on the cover of, I think, Italian GQ. Jesse, that's not his last name, but anyway, you all know what I'm saying. So we have more Black, and particularly Black women, editor-in-chiefs of magazines right now. We have more Black images of Black people on the covers of mainstream magazines right now. So what does that say for the state of kind of Black people in fashion and Black style?
Well, one thing I want to say, let's see if I have a response to the actual question, but I want to shout out Lindsay Peoples because early on in both of our careers, before she was in EIC, she was writing this story about the lack of diversity in the fashion industry, particularly as it related to fashion models and runways, and she was really part of a cadre of people who were shaping these conversations around body acceptance, around racial and ethnic diversity, gender diversity, etc. And she interviewed me for this story. And it was a story that really did so much for both of our public-facing careers, and so I always have deep respect for her for that piece and the way and the sensitivity and the brilliance in which she wrote it. And I was glad to be able to contribute some words to that piece. Now, I would love to hear what you all have to say about this, the actual question, because I'm situated in a place where I study the fashion industry and critique it, right? But I am not a practitioner. I'm not working in that space. So the thing that comes to mind to me is that, I have deep respect for the people who really are in the trenches, beyond the chiffon trench, who are, in these spaces, who are game-changing on the day-to-day basis, really fighting those trench wars to have us be seen and represented in ways that are affirming to who we know ourselves to be, to allow us to exist in the fullness of our humanity. But the thing that I still find so damn troubling is that the larger global capitalist machine still has the power to dictate when Blackness is in vogue and when it isn't. Right? When Blackness should be put on display and when it can't be. When Blackness is a threat to society and when it's the muse of the world. Right? And for as a historian and cultural critic, it's that machine that I'm always trying to critique in order for us to dismantle it. Right? And I think that, and it's no one person who can do that work of dismantling. But I see my role as historian to be the one who serves in that role of truth teller, right? That we can hold both of these things in tension. The fact that we love seeing us style out on these covers with the fact that global capitalism is killing us, right? We have to be able to hold both of those things because it's the joy and the imagination and the creativity that gives us the tools to dismantle these global systems of oppression.
Thank you.
I have to ask the question again. I think I see that in fashion that when 2020 happened and people were getting opportunities, for the most part, they were going to the same people. So it wasn't like someone fresh and new was becoming an editor-in-chief. It was someone who kind of already existed in that space. And I think that's still the case, where it's just like, yes, you're seeing more people, but we're seeing the same people. We're seeing the same people get new opportunities versus like someone who is not already here to get an opportunity. And I think too, it becomes an issue of like education as well, because I know I did not graduate with a ton of Black students. So I think it puts us at a disadvantage when these jobs are calling people to be educated in these fields, but there's not so many of us. So I think that becomes, it's a double-edged thing, where it's just like, we don't have enough people with the education, and then the same people are just moving up or getting the same jobs. So it's not necessarily moving the needle forward.
I'm with you. I mean, I think there are many ways to think about it and to look at it. On one level, I think, representation is important and exciting. I think of young, Black girls and Black boys who can see themselves just reflected in places of beauty. Like, that is important. Reflected in places of consideration and care and thoughtfulness, like you did, Monica, with the exhibition. Like, that does something for people. And then at the same time, I'm really curious about what is beyond representation. If so much energy for decades has been spent in getting on the cover or holding an editorial position, well, it doesn't stop there. And I mentioned this when we were on a panel at our store downtown with Antoine. In the mall, at the Oculus, we have a concept store there, and there's this gorgeous Banana Republic there, two-story Banana Republic, and there was a campaign with these two gorgeous Black models, a male and a female, like on a horse, and it was gorgeous, just absolutely stunning. And if we stopped at representation, well, then that would be enough. But I find it curious that we don't question, what does it look like to be the face of a company named after like genocidal tendencies in Latin America? It's called Banana Republic. So what are we the face of? What are we fighting to be the front of? And we don't question that. The same thing even with the recent presidential election. I love Kamala Harris, but what were we fighting for a Black woman to be the face of, to be the front for? And so I'm really curious about, in this moment, what is the evolution of thinking, of activism that moves beyond vision, that moves beyond the surface into actual power, into actual decision-making capacities, because I think that's what we're really stuck at, is the inability to make the decisions, to write the checks, to green light outside of the whims of individuals whose interest in Blackness waxes and wanes.
Well said. Well said. I know we are running close to time, so I wanted to open up questions from the audience, if you have. Yes.
This is a question for all four of y'all, but who would you
So who would we say in our lives propelled our careers to get us where we are today? Great question.
I can answer that. I would love to lift the name of this incredible stylist, Anatoly Smith. Some may know him, but Anatoly and I worked together on a couple of shoots. And it was actually Anatoly working at Vanity Fair that first got me in the door at Vanity Fair. He was a stylist there. He was doing a shoot with Billy Porter, and I think that image came up. And he's like, hey, they're looking for new photographers. Could you just send some images to me? And he sent them on to the team, and then they selected me for that shoot. And that was the beginning of my career at Vanity Fair. So I want to lift up Anatoly and just the power of what it means to have your people in position to bring your name in the room is also important. And I think names like Anatoly and figures like Anatoly don't always get that acknowledgement.
I think there have been many moments and many people over the course of my career, Monica being one of them. My work wouldn't be possible had she not written Slaves to Fashion and made the work legible for an academic audience that you could write very intelligently and deeply and theoretically about the power of dress. I'd say in terms of my public-facing career, one of the big moments was after I published a very academic article about the organization SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the fact that they wore denim. It was part of their denim overalls were a part of their uniform, if you will, right? It was a political statement. It was a way to unite the organization. These young people were part of this very revolutionary-minded organization. And I wrote this piece for an academic audience, but it found its way outside of the academy, in part because I was writing shorter blog pieces online about SNCC and denim, and there was a larger conversation, this is around 2013, 2014, around Black Lives Matter. And people were looking back to the earlier roots of the Black freedom movement, and here we have these pieces about SNCC, people wearing denim, and then of course Ava DuVernay at this time does the film Selma, and she has Common's character, for example, wearing denim overalls, and I go to the premiere and I meet Ava and she tells me, I read your article on SNCC and I made sure I gave it to Ruth Carter because we wanted to have people in the film who are wearing denim. And she's like, you should reach out to Ruth, and I was like, so I interviewed Ruth about Selma and all the costumes, and that opened up all these other doors for me to be able to interview costume designers and other folks who were using dress to tell narrative stories and cinematic platforms and contexts. So I think that, writing that piece, it was born out of my own curiosity about the fact that these people weren't wearing the respectable Sunday's best attire. It spun out into all these other things with lasting popular culture impact.
I would honestly just my community on Twitter, because I think that is what gave me, for people to have so much trust in what I was saying. So I think when we did launch our first publication, we had so much support, from Aria Hughes, who interviewed you for a piece about Vibe, to have Joan Smalls on the cover. I had built such an amazing audience that trusted and believed in what I was doing, but also because I wearing Black designers. I wear Black designers every single day. So I buy them, I wear them, I talk about them, I support them. So I think just it being a part of my practice every single day gave me a really, really strong community of support. So launching the publication was just incredible to I would just have to say my support that I built through Twitter, literally social media.
So I'm going to throw mine back a little further. I mean, there's been, Tanisha's, a lot of people that I could reference who've been inspiring, but the person I want to shout out in this moment would be, his name is Wiley Ferguson, and he was my high school photography and art teacher, as well as the president of the modeling club. And he was someone that, seeing this Black man who was teaching at a public college prep high school in Cincinnati, Ohio, but had modeled for GQ, had been in the Ebony Fashion Fair shows, had studied painting under Picasso, was someone that opened my eyes to that I could be anybody, and actually physically what it would look like, dressed like this today. I have to give it up to Wiley Ferguson. Next question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question for Dario. Thank you for being on the panel. And my question has to do with the sort of the emotional and sometimes physical pressure of being the first in terms of doing something. I go way, way, way back. I'm much older than you, so I remember what a time when sometimes in my community or even in business, being the first, there was a lot of danger associated with that. A lot of it was emotional. So when you were offered the right to do the cover, of course you're talented enough, somebody to do it, but did you struggle at all with the idea of, at what point you realize, oh wow, I'm the first, and then the idea of your art? Was there ever sort of like a thing you had to deal with like balancing the pressure between those two things?
Thank you. That's a great question. I did not think about it. I didn't want to know, actually, prior to the shoot. Like, I didn't know. And because I just wanted to be able to focus. I just wanted to be able to execute and not think about anything outside of the shoot itself. But I will say that I don't necessarily feel a type of pressure, but I do feel the responsibility, for sure, which I own, yeah, and accept.
Yes.
Hello, thank you all for your wonderful words. Something Tanisha said earlier really stuck with me about historians serving as the role of truth teller. And I feel like right now in my life, I'm really trying to find my own personal truth. So I wanted to ask, with your either personal relations with Andre or your study of him, what you believe Andre's truth to be.
I don't know if I have the authority to comment on that, to say. I mean, I don't know, especially because unlike you, I didn't know him personally. But one thing that I really admired in reading his work, but also watching the documentary, was how he really saw himself as standing in the gap for everyday Black folk, particularly Black folk and queer Black folk from the South. And I think that his orientation toward a global South perspective is one that deeply informs my own work. And to hear him talk about the women in his life who loved him and were instrumental in shaping who he was makes me think about my own mother and how finding my way and finding my voice and my truth came through learning more about her. So it was using my tools as a historian, as a writer, as a thinker, to unpack something about her history growing up in the 1960s and 70s, and then using that to write these larger histories about SNCC and denim, about Black resistance and the emergence of Black studies programs on campus. But it came through a curiosity about those closest to me, about the environments in which I grew up. And so I think that's a thing that André Leon Talley and I perhaps share.
Yes, in the back.
Thank you. Echoing the thank you for all of your wonderful words today. In the times that we are in right now, I know for me the thing that's keeping me, I guess, plugged into a life force is my own creative practices. But for people who make a living with your creative practices, which can change your relationship, I think, with that, I'm interested in what is keeping you fueled right now for the work, for the fight, for the future, for the vision, for whatever it is that you're building. What's the practice right now?
Well, for me, I think with Black Fashion Fair, I understand that like what I'm doing is like lifelong work, and that it's literally not about me, but it's about the community that I built, the community that they're building with each other. So I think as long as I kind of stick with knowing that like I chose this, like I'm gonna be doing this forever. If it's up, if it's down, like I chose this and this is what I want, and I'm walking in that purpose. But yeah, I think that is what definitely keeps me like moving, because there's there's days when I don't want to do it. But
Okay.
You all want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. Sure. You know, what a time to be alive. You know, what keeps me fueled is doing my best to make more space. Like more space around what I'm currently witnessing, what we're currently witnessing. You know, kind of like when you look at the stars at night, you're kind of looking back in time. And so anything that is currently happening is actually already past tense. It's a type of momentum that started a while ago. And so how do we then create more space to imagine what is on the other side of what just has to unfold, right? The lawful unfolding of what it means to be, you know, human and find yourself in a time that maybe we didn't realize that all of the work that we've been doing up until this point was preparing us for this time. We thought it was for something else, and it's now. And I, for one, am extremely excited because although it may not feel good and it may not be easy, you know, God's word is true. And so it's really believing that, understanding that, and leaning into the tools, resources that particularly Black culture has in seeing beyond what is current.
Just quickly, I would say, again, going back to what I loved about your question about truth-telling, is for me, it's really been, I'm using this moment to really dig deep within myself. So really enhancing my spiritual practices, my meditative practices. I'm trying to eat right, drink some water, right? You know, like it's these simple things. And really that practice came out of the realities of the pandemic for me. So it was around 2020 really that I started to really fortify myself and realize how important it was to have a fortified spirit. And it was through that I could tap into something, a channel that I needed to keep open in order to facilitate the art. You know, now the art ain't happening as easily right now as I need it to be because I have a book that's overdue, but I'm just telling you the practice that for me is foregrounding it, that's really keeping me nourished. It's the spiritual practice, it's the eating and drinking water.
I think for me it's the continuum, right? I think about the ancestors. I think about my parents who did sit-ins with the NAACP and were kicked out of restaurants. And a lot of their lives were devoted to service. I think about the students at FIT who I'm teaching, the future, who I teach journalism. So there's a responsibility to teach them about the truth and kind of the very harsh realities we're living in, but to understand democracy through journalism. And then I think about Native Son, my organization that I founded, that is inspiration and empowerment for Black, gay, and queer men, which is really about liberation, right? So all of those things. And then today at church, the sermon was, this woman in the orange is from my church, I will not be erased, was the sermon, right? And how we've been through this so many times before historically. And so we have to make that choice. And so it's not great. You know, I'm fighting a respiratory thing that I'm sure is impacted by like just the anxiety and stress of everyday watching of Instagram and the news, right? But we still show up. And I think it's the showing up on this continuum that keeps me going. All right, well, I'm going to turn this over to our host, Tavia. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, amazing panelists, amazing. Thank you. And thank you, Park Avenue Armory, for having us.